Have you ever found yourself sitting in front of a screen, typing into a search engine some variation of the words actually good gay movies, actually good lesbian movies, actually good queer movies, whatever? No, then you're probably luckier than me, or at least less desperate than me, or maybe you just have a life and don't spend all your time living vicariously through movies and television. Well, I don't have one, a life that is. That's precisely why I do live my life through fictional media. This is a particular trouble when all you want to do is watch specifically queer media to the extent that I do, as queer media has always been less common, harder to find, made irrelevant by dominant society, yada yada yada. So constantly trying to live vicariously through it is pretty hard when quality and diverse queer content, and bad queer content too, simply doesn't come knocking at your front door. And even in the rare chance that you think you might have found something that could be worth watching, you can't know until you've actually watched said thing. Actually good gay movies? It's a simple question, yet so difficult to answer. Everyone seems to have their own opinions on which ones are good and which shall never be remembered, for even uttering their name can bring forth unwanted trouble. Although there are some that are generally seen as universally good, these are usually uber popular, and chances are, if you've watched as many of them as me, you've likely already watched them all. While these acclaimed films are typically held in such esteem for a good reason, for those that need and want more, I think this will be the video for you. With that being said, here's a list of queer movies, mostly lesbian, that reminded me that hey, maybe not all gay movies suck. And of course, this list is going to be according to my own personal opinion and taste. You may not like these, but this is my video, so I do. This list is also not exhaustive. I can't have possibly watched every movie out there, and I can't have possibly included them all in this video. So if there's anything I've missed that you think falls under this category that I'm talking about today, please comment down below because I'd like to make more of these in the future. For each movie, I'll also be putting a happy ending or sad ending label in the description below because I know some people appreciate having some kind of warning before watching something. But I'd still advise you to tread carefully as my definition of happy or sad may differ slightly from yours or maybe even widely.
Testing. 1, 2, 3. I guess that's on. Hello. My name is Polly Vandersma, and I'm a Girl Friday.
At first, we have I've Heard the Mermaid Singing, released in 1987. It was director and writer Patricia Rozema's first feature length film. It stars Sheila McCarthy as Polly Vandersma, a young woman in her 30s simply passing through life with no real attachments to the world around her. She works as a temp for a temp agency and she's not very good at it, a fact that she acknowledges herself.
They don't call that often because I guess I'm not very good at it.
She struggles to maintain a steady stream of work, jumping from one position to another, and the only real constant and passion in her life is photography, because it offers her an opportunity to escape the mundanities and disappointments of everyday life. For Polly, photography is not just a hobby to pass the time, but it's a way for her to transport herself into alternative worlds and imagine different versions of herself and peer into the lives of those around her. When she starts working as an assistant at an art gallery, she falls in love with a woman, presumably for the first time, who also happens to be her art director boss. This is certainly important to Polly's overarching character arc, but the equally important, arguably most important part of the film has to be her transformation as an artist. One of the most impactful parts of the film is when Polly finally musters up the courage to make her private hobby public by anonymously submitting some of her photography work to the art gallery she works at, which leads to a whole series of events that unfold during the movie. This is definitely my favorite of all of Rosema's films. There's something so comforting and personal about how Polly's story is told, partly because the film was purposely crafted to be a sort of glimpse into a personal video diary. The film cuts back and forth between Polly's in real time camcorder footage and extended sequences depicting her time in life working at the art gallery. It ends up resulting in this interesting meld of fiction and mockumentary. It's not a fancy movie, but it is a very self reflective one, and watching Polly go through a journey of artistic turmoil and understanding manages to feel both familiar yet entirely new. To anyone that is artistically or creatively inclined and understands the struggle of the creative process, Polly's story is recognizable. The specifics of your life and that of Polly's may differ, but the feelings are the same. So much so that the film was almost too intimate and too reflective of who I view myself to be that it was at times painful to watch. For Polly's pain would suddenly become mine. Throughout the film, McCarthy gives such an immensely naturalistic performance that I found myself frequently forgetting that Polly is a fictional character and not a real person. I don't know if I've heard The Mermaid Singing would be everybody's cup of tea, because it's not a traditional romance film, but it's right up my alley of what I look for when it comes to queer films. The film speaks to the experience of not quite fitting in correctly, of not following the right steps into adulthood, and of not being appropriately productive in a way that our capitalistic society identifies as useful. Polly isn't as confident or economically secure or emotionally stable as we expect a 30-year-old woman to be, and she doesn't necessarily want to be. She's just herself, whatever that is, and the film shows us that that's okay.
Gosh, sometimes I think my head is like a gas tank. You have to be really careful what you put into it because it might just affect the whole system.
着席。
これなんだ先生、今日からそれ使ってください。授業聞こえないんで。
Oh, A Bride for Rip Van Winkle. My love. Even talking about this movie feels too personal. Even though I only watched the film twice, it's managed to leave such a deep mark on me that I really don't know how long it'll take before I'm able to fully recover from it. A Bride for Rip Van Winkle is a 2016 film directed by Shunji Iwai. It stars Haru Kuroki as Nanami Minagawa, a character who's kind of hard to describe, along with an overarching plot that's also kind of hard to describe without spoiling too much of what happens. Without getting too specific, the film essentially follows Nanami during a specific portion of her life. In the beginning of the film, she's a school teacher, but this doesn't really last long as she gets fired soon after. She then starts dating this guy, which turns into a marriage with him, and not long after, things go south. There's also this other guy who's one of the only characters besides Nanami that's a constant throughout the film. He's a significant character too, but you can find out more about him if you watch the movie. I suggest going into this movie knowing as little about it as possible, but be prepared because it will rip out your heart and break it into tiny little pieces. But at the same time, it'll also make sure to gently and lovingly put all those little pieces back together. Like I've heard The Mermaid Singing, A Bride for Rip Van Winkle is a sort of late in life coming of age tale, a category of films I really appreciate, as I'm a person who is also a late bloomer of sorts. I like these films because they take on this idea of queer temporality, showing us that it's never too late or too early to be growing or changing, and that there's no proper timeline or way to live your life. In fact, there might not even be a timeline at all. It's a quiet movie. Kuroki's performance is also quiet, but the quietness of the film really speaks volumes. I also appreciate how the film handles specific topics, particularly when it comes to the adult work or sex work industry. For those that do decide to check out this movie, you'll notice that things, bad or good, kind of just keep happening to our main character Nanami, which can be frustrating and confusing since you can't always tell where the movie's going to go, but stick with it, trust me. For the queer enthusiast, the film is undeniably so, but I'd say it's a more subdued queerness, not in a way that feels like it's watered down or made palpable for straight audiences, at least not from my perspective, but in a way that makes the queer aspects unexpected and a pleasant surprise. It's quite long, coming in at just under 3 hours, so if you have the time to spare, please watch it, and let me know what you think too.
Nina?
Come.
The third film on this list is Ghost. This is one I watched recently, so recency bias may be playing a role, but I felt like I had to include it in this video. Ghost is a 2005 release directed by Christian Petzold. I'm probably pronouncing all these names so poorly. Anyway, I don't think I'm in love with this film as much as I am with other films on this list, and I can acknowledge that there are some aspects that don't quite work as well as they could have, but it nonetheless left me with a positive impression by the end. I honestly didn't expect to leave the film happy because I've seen a couple of Petzold's other films and they didn't really impress me, but this one was definitely an exception. It mainly follows Nina, played by Julia Hummer, and her relationship with another young girl, Tony. Nina is an orphan staying at a kind of boarding house or foster home who suddenly meets Tony at a park one day. They both begin a friendship that blurs the line between platonic and romantic, but it's pretty obvious that Tony has intentions that aren't clear or entirely honest. At the same time, there's another character, Francois, who crosses the two girls' paths, and all their lives, particularly Nina's and Francois', intertwine and unfold in an interesting and unexpected way. Everyone's performances are all pretty good in this, but those of Hummer and Marianne Basler, who plays Francois, are particularly notable. There's a great muted fragility that they both bring to their characters, and when the characters finally do get to interacting with each other in the later portions of the film becomes so much more powerful. The time they share, although short, brings this film from a kind of okay one to a great one. The film's got a typical Europeanness to it in the sense that it can feel kind of cold, unwelcoming, or aimless at times, but here I think it works and it makes sense since we're following a character like Nina who also has that same type of coldness and aimlessness. There's a sense of dread and sadness that looms over the entire film, but also strangely a sense of hope. I knew that I enjoyed my first watch of this movie when, by the film's end, all I wanted to do was follow Nina's story for hours and hours and see her grow up and see who she becomes in the future.
Right here, gazing at the moon. It's
Oh my
the
God!
last thing.
Steffi!
Good Manners. Where do I even begin with Good Manners? It's a 2017 Brazilian film directed by both Juliana Rojas and Marco Dutra. The main character, Clara, played by Isabel Zua, is a nurse looking for stable employment in order to pay her rent. She ends up getting a job as a nanny working for Anna, a wealthy pregnant woman living on her own for reasons I get explained later on in the film. It's part supernatural, part horror, and also part thriller, and there's also a mythological aspect to the film, but it still manages to remain grounded and feel realistic. The queerness, while I wouldn't say is the most important aspect of the film, can't be separated from the story that's at the heart of this film. I will admit though, I did struggle to get through the movie at first. I always stopped at various portions of the film because I felt like there wasn't one particular moment to keep me intrigued. But it was when this significant dramatic moment occurs towards the midpoint of the film that I finally got hooked and I had to see how the story played out. The narrative decision at that point in the story might not work for everyone, and I'm being vague here because I don't want to spoil it, but if you stay with it and follow this movie to where it wants to take you, it truly becomes something special. It's not a flawless film, especially with the second half that kind of meanders around and probably could have used a bit more cuts, but the ending more than makes up for it. Something I appreciate about this film is how fresh and new it felt, especially when it comes to the category of lesbian films. I feel like there aren't many that combine these elements of mythology, horror, the supernatural, and queerness. At the end of the day, I'm just thankful that I actually did finish this movie because I don't regret it at all. 2ODK is honestly pretty great, even barring the queer elements, which certainly do add a great flavor to the film. Eiko Koike and Maho Nonami star as Nozomi and Lana, a pair of young women who are both aspiring actors and who both happen to be sharing the same apartment. At the start of the movie, it's revealed that a role that they both auditioned for had come down to just the two of them as potential candidates. Knowing that, you can probably assume what happens next just by looking at the poster. When we're introduced to Nozomi and Lana, we already recognize that their relationship is contentious. There are small things here and there that they do to each other that clearly get on each other's nerves, but it's when they realize that they're the last two candidates for an important acting gig that these petty slights turn into full-on physical altercations. Y'all know I'm a sucker for a pair of women who hate each other's guts, but also really admire each other, but also are really jealous of each other, and maybe even desire each other, in that way. On second thought, probably not, because I only have one other video on this channel. I didn't mention any of that in there. Speaking of, maybe now's a good time for a shameless plug. If you're interested, you should totally check out my other video, which discusses some of my personal favorite wardrobes in film and television. Back to the video. There's something so thrilling about the homoeroticism that almost seems inherent in stories like these about female relationships and rivalries rife with jealousy, obsession, and competitiveness. When I say I like enemies to lovers storylines, this is what I mean, okay? I don't mean that other shit, okay? The sheer ridiculousness of where this movie goes works really well in creating a perfect balance of comedy, horror, and thriller. Watching it also feels pretty cathartic to an extent. I think we can all relate to having annoying roommates or family members and wanting to do something about it. And dare I say, this is one of the greatest love stories of all time. And I'm not even trying to be funny or ironic. It's an all-out battle of who can be the most petty. It's a genuine, wholehearted commitment on the part of both Nozomi and Lana to show each other who's boss. And it's arguably more romantic because of it.
J'ai perdu ma chatte. Oh mon Dieu! Par Ramsès II, comment allons-nous faire?
The sixth film I have on this list is, yep, that's right, another European movie, and a French one at that. I know. Attack me all you want, but the Europeans make good movies sometimes too, okay? In this particular case, it's not the best European film by a long shot, or even the best French film either, but I enjoyed watching it, and that's why I included it here, okay? Not for any other reason, of course. Okay, maybe there was one other reason, but I mean, can you blame me if I had other reasons? My Sole Desire is a 2022 film directed by Lucie Borlotto. I apologize if I pronounced that really poorly. It stars Louis Chevrolet. My Americanness is coming out right now. As Manon and Zita Hano as Mia, two dancers working at the same strip club. While Manon, the protagonist, is a newcomer on the scene, Mia is a lot more experienced and sort of takes Manon under her wing. Although Manon is undeniably the film's main character, Mia is just as important for the story as Manon is. I gotta say, I do love a good old stripper or exotic dancer type of movie. I haven't seen many and I'm trying to get on that, but the ones I have seen I've thoroughly enjoyed. And when you mix lesbianism or some form of homoeroticism into them, then it's kind of hard for me not to be sold. There's a special complex quality to queer films that involve strippers or other sex work occupations. It gets into ideas like the ethics of sex work, the relationship between performers and their audiences, bodily autonomy and liberation, classism, puritanism, and the potential for solidarity among an oppressed group of some sort. It's undeniable that there exists such a rich, fertile ground through which really great films and commentaries surrounding the subject matter can be produced. I don't think I'd say My Sole Desire touches on all of these topics, or even really touches on them all in a good way. That'd be impossible, but I appreciate its attempts. It's kind of messy and imperfect, taking some swings that I don't think always land. But god damn it, I'd be lying if I said that the final rushing to see each other slash like misconnection scene didn't tug at my heartstrings, okay? It was cheesy, but also kind of romantic. Not even kind of, it was romantic. And sometimes I just want cheesiness. There were times while I was watching the film that I was just sitting there in my chair, giddy and rubbing my feet together and laughing and shit. Probably looking absolutely ridiculous. Anyway.
But it really doesn't matter. Yellow teeth between pink lips. Eyeshadow with a crazy look.
Let's finish off with the Kelly Reichardt movie.
Did you tell me how you ended up in this class?
I just saw people going in.
I make a fool of myself.
No. It was interesting. I never knew a student had any rights.
You gonna come back?
When's it next?
Thursday. Every Tuesday and Thursday for 9 weeks.
I'm not signed up or anything.
They're not gonna check.
I was debating whether or not to include this in the video, mostly because I was lazy. But I feel like 6 movies is too little. So I'm going to include this as an extra bonus one. You might have already watched this, being that it kind of had a little bit of a resurgence recently on TikTok because of a certain someone. But if you don't have TikTok, then maybe you have no idea what I'm talking about. I honestly can't really gauge how much the film was actually talked about outside of my own personal For You page. So I could be entirely wrong and making a fool of myself. Regardless, 2016 Certain Women is a must-watch, you guys. The film mainly follows 3 different women, all living ordinary lives in Montana. Laura Dern is Laura, Michelle Williams is Gina, and Lily Gladstone is the rancher. Just the rancher. Each of the 3 women have separate stories divided into separate chapters that also somewhat converge in the final act. Laura Dern's and Michelle Williams' portions are the first 2, and they're not bad by any means, but it's clear that Lily Gladstone's part is the obvious shiner. If you've seen any other Kelly Reichardt film, you're probably familiar with her style and know what to expect. From what I can tell, her films aren't everyone's cup of tea, but Lily Gladstone's part in Certain Women, on the other hand, is pretty unanimously loved, from what I can tell. Gladstone's performance in this film is so utterly heartbreaking. I genuinely can't recall another performance as of late that has affected me as deeply and as personally as Lily Gladstone's performance did when I watched it for the first time. Even thinking about the movie can make me sad. There were these little things here and there that Gladstone brought to the character that made me feel very represented. From the moment I saw the rancher enter that classroom, I knew that I was in for a treat. But be prepared to have your heart broken if you watch this. And Kristen Stewart also plays Lily Gladstone's opposite, so if you're into all that jazz, you should check it out.
Okay. I have to go feed now. Animals will be wondering where I'm at.
Can I play something for you? Okay, I said Certain Women was going to be the last one in this video, but I have to mention and give a shout out to the television show Generation. I found myself thinking about the show as of late, and I just miss it. I'm thinking of potentially doing a whole separate video on the show, specifically about Riley and Greta's relationship, to discuss why I like it and why I think the show has depicted one of the best queer relationships I've seen on screen since I don't even know how long. A long time. But I don't know, I'm still debating. But if you think you'd be interested in seeing that, let me know. It's such a shame that the show got cancelled. Well, this marks the end of the video. I know there weren't many movies on this list, but that doesn't mean there weren't more I wanted to include. I actually had a master list of sorts that I was thinking of including for this, but there were too many, so these are only the ones I prioritized for one reason or another. If you guys want to see more of this type of content, let me know. And like I said before, if there are other films you think I missed, put it down below, and I will see you guys next time.
Back to the computer. Oh my gosh, I'm such a nerd. Let's see if I got any new comments. Aw, man.